Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. Thank you for joining us for today's IBM Tech Exchange webinar. I just want to go over a couple of housekeeping things before we begin. You should see a Q&A box towards the bottom of your screen where you can begin to submit any questions that you have for today's presenters. And later today, you'll be sent a link to the on-demand recording, along with a link to the IBM Tech Exchange community where you can connect directly with our experts. So without further ado, I will hand it over to today's presenters.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. Welcome to this webinar. My name is Preeti Patil. I'm working as an architect in IBM Security Verify team. My role is to drive the longer-term vision and the roadmap on analytics capabilities in IAM tools. Currently, I'm also focusing on how we can infuse the threat intelligence in Verify and apply AI and ML to secure the organizations against large-scale identity attacks. And that's the topic for today. Milan, over to you.
Thanks, Preeti. My name is Milan Patel. I'm on the product management team with IBM Security Verify. Work closely with Preeti in really helping understand, what we want to deliver within the product, how we're addressing customer needs, and how we're really solving hard problems that we can help deliver through IBM Security Verify. So today's topic is actually a very interesting topic. And as we think about a lot of the pain points and some of the market trends that we're seeing and conversations that we're having with customers, a lot of them have come to us with the problem of how do we proactively detect and mitigate large-scale identity attacks? And in doing so, and as the product team here, our goal is to help those customers, address those pain points in a way that's scalable, but also providing a lot of intelligence around those attacks. So what we're going to be talking about is how IBM Security Verify is not only looking at the problem, but what is the problem and what are customers and what is the market telling us? And then how are we looking to address it in the context of IBM Security Verify? So let's get started. When we think about customer pain points, and these are actually 3 quotes that we've got from customers over the last year around how they are feeling the pain associated with the threats that could happen in the context of digital identity. So the first is you always want to be able to balance user experience, but also be cautious of the attacks that could happen. So, someone is increasing their failed logins. Is it actually a customer that's truly forgetting their password? Or is it actually a threat where it's a slow roll on an attack because the failed logins have spiked a little bit based on previous record? So this is a pain point that someone has come to us. The second is, do I have a potential vulnerability through a credential stuffing attack? I'm being enumerated. I'm getting many of my users enumerated in terms of credential stuffing. And I want to be able to stay ahead of those attacks, which then can be associated with a compromised account or even a compromised set of resources. And then the last thing is around just the sheer number of rising breaches, right? So there's a whole NIST guidance around the limit of password policies, being able to check compromised passwords, removing the need for customers to use common passwords. And this is, again, a trend that we're seeing and a piece of feedback that we've heard. Now, when we think about this from a data standpoint, right, the IBM Security does a cost of data breach yearly. And in 2023, a single cost of a breach amassed to about $4.45 million. And more, because this data point is rising in terms of the cost associated with a single data breach, more and more organizations are planning to increase their security investments as a result of breaches, including incident response, planning for testing, employee training, as well as threat detection and response tools. And this percentage has gone to now 51%. So at the end of the day, our customers' basic question is our digital platform secure enough with a growing number of identity thefts and breaches and attacks? And that's truly what we're looking to help solve from a customer pain point standpoint. The next thing I'll mention is, now that we've talked about the cost of data breach, let's take a look at the actual vectors that truly make this an item that folks should be considering as top of mind, right? The thing with a data breach is it doesn't become a priority until it happens, which is reactive. It should actually be a priority before it happens to be proactive. Now, when we think about the top two vectors in terms of frequency, stolen or compromised credentials and phishing, both of those two items are more than 30% of the breach vectors that happen. And they are also quite costly ones. But when we think about these two specifically, the thing that comes to mind is this is the perimeter. The perimeter is identity and access management. And in a robust identity and access management solution, the goal of this is to prevent and mitigate the breaches from the edge, from the vectors that are occurring, with whether it's phishing or stolen or compromised credentials. So the three things that we look for, and we have natively in our solution as we think about how do we solve this problem, is how do we provide native threat detection and intelligence? How do we provide native, strong, and phishing-resistant authentication methods? And how do we continuously analyze for risk detection, right? With the combination of these three things, our goal is to help mitigate the two most frequent vectors of a breach, again, which is compromised credentials and phishing. Then this is where a robust identity access management solution helps you take that more proactive effect rather than reactive in the scenario where a data breach happens and now you're scrambling. So with this set of data points, with this customer pain point, the philosophy that we take as a product team is we look at it in the context of a persona. A persona is someone that is actually looking at this in the context of their day-to-day job. And at the end of the day, our goal is to equip all of our personas that use our product to be the most effective, efficient, and secure in how they're rolling out the ability to protect and secure their organization. So our persona is Scott. Scott's an IAM admin. And at the end of the day, the admin wants to be able to have visibility into suspicious traffic for identity-related attacks to secure their organization against large-scale attacks and proactively mitigate identity theft. When we think about this, the goal here is to be proactive and to equip Scott with the tooling and the knowledge to understand what's happening in real time and then take codified and automated responses to be able to stay ahead of these threats. And at the end of the day, this is the admin and this is the persona that we're building this for. And as you see it through the experiences and the demos that we do, you'll see how we've taken this user experience and user need into account. So with all that said, we set the context of the pain point. We set the context of some of the data-driven decisions that we're looking at to be able to help mitigate this. We talked about the customer need and the persona need. Now we'll get into how we're actually solving the problem. So before we get into some of the details, just a quick level set of what is IBM Security Verify SaaS. It's an identity as a service that offers single sign-on, multi-factor, risk-based authentication, and governance and lifecycle capabilities. It delivers this fully as a identity as a service. And we have enabling modernization components to help organizations bridge their existing assets, whether it's user directories, whether it's legacy applications, whether it's MFA into things like Radius or Windows operating systems or Linux operating systems. We have enabling components that come with the use of IBM Security Verify SaaS because no customer starts fresh. Everyone has a set of existing tools and utilities that need to be connected to help in the modernization as well as the additional posture to help secure the resources using IBM Security Verify SaaS. Now, IBM Security Verify SaaS is a global operation. We have a 99.99% SLA, a set of certifications and compliance, and we're deployed across the globe, as you can see, in the various regions that we have deployment locations. Now, let's dive a little bit deeper into actually what we're doing with this threat detection and response capability natively in Verify. So as we think about this in the context of what is it that we're building and what is it that we have with IBM Security Verify, focus on the bottom half of the picture where you have IBM Security Verify. What we have looked at is we've looked at the funnel of how authentication, login, user experience, registration, and other things come into play. And what we've basically done is we've segmented this into 4 key categories, right? The first category is edge protection. So think of this as a macro understanding of what is the traffic coming in, right? So this is where DDoS, cross-site scripting, geolocation, and other things. Think of this as a web application firewall or a WAF. This is what we use from the edge standpoint, and it looks at macro level traffic, right? And in cases where the macro level traffic is suspicious, we block it. In cases where macro level traffic looks good, we allow it. Then we get into the actual application level traffic, in which this threat detection capability that Preeti is going to be demoing is invoked. And this is where the analysis happens as part of a constant feedback loop. We look at login traffic, failed logins, credential stuffing type of events, and we continuously feed our model to be able to understand which traffic is actually legitimate and which traffic isn't, in the context of single sign-on, multi-factor, login, authentication flows, and so on. As we look at that, this is where we take the attempt to proactively alert, but also in the future block even first factor logins from happening, right? So that's the second part of the funnel. The third part of the funnel is now that we've actually allowed it in the macro context and then in the application first factor context, we now do additional checks. Okay, are people using compromised passwords? So as people type in their passwords, attempt to log in, we'll check that as part of the funnel approach that we take in ensuring that at each checkpoint, there's guardrails to understand and assess risk. And then the last one is authentication. So now someone has authenticated, they have a session. Using the session details in the authentication, we're able to then additionally do a continuous risk score, right? And we'll get into that as well. And this is where things around passwordless, multi-factor authentication, risk-based authentication come into play. But as you can see, we're building out a robust set of checkpoints across the funnel of traffic that we're seeing so that we can help our customers be proactive and not necessarily worry about much of the threats that happen, but more so allow the platform to be able to give them the real-time decisions that they need and the mitigation points that they take advantage to stay ahead of these attacks that could possibly happen in their environment. And at the end of the day, IBM Security Verify is providing these native threat detection, right, and response capabilities, but we also expand this out to be able to send it to other solutions that can consume it and harness the data for additional analysis and remediation, in which this can also then be fed back into Verify. So you can see the feedback loop of how we're thinking about building this natively in the context of an identity access management solution. So with that, we're going to actually talk about the 3 sections here. The first one that we're going to be talking about is the password intelligence capability that we have. And we'll describe that here in a little bit. So password intelligence. So what's the use case? And this is actually probably the simplest use cases out of the 3 that we're going to be talking about. But it's really helping organizations stay ahead from the human nature that is user management with passwords. And the use case here is to identify and prevent individuals from using common breach passwords and mitigate against data breach attacks, right? And the impact statement here is we've had a customer in the span of 3 weeks really identify 400,000 accounts using common breach passwords and take them through a journey of changing those passwords to more secure passwords. And the real nugget here from a user experience standpoint was there wasn't a single end user that complained about that. So at the end of the day, we're not only balancing proactively mitigating, but also balancing the user experience associated with this function and with this experience. So with that, I'm going to show you a quick demo of what this really entails. and I'm going to start sharing my screen. So in my screen, you can see a Verify SaaS tenant. This is the identity as a service that I was talking about, where you can, onboard applications and so on, manage users, define authentication factors that you want to use, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. But really what I want to talk about with this password intelligence capability is this password management. We have an intelligence list. You can edit this intelligence list. It's asking me to get back in the tenant, so I'll do that in a second. Notice how I get into the tenant, I use a passkey. So passkeys are supported out of the box, and I'll show you that demo actually here in a little bit. But you can see here is where I can now enable this password intelligence feature. This is powered by IBM Security X-Force, which is a team that is basically ethical hackers, researchers, responders, and analysts that really work in the community. And they work with the password cracking community as well. They sniff some of the dark web, and they basically help us collect the sources for common passwords, in which then Verify as a solution helps enforce. So there's different things that a end customer can do, right? They can audit the use of common passwords, meaning they just have a data point of how many users are using common passwords. They can actually warn the user, and this is what I'll be demoing. And then they can actually prevent the user from logging in and then taking them to a change password flow, where they would, again, prevent the user from using a common password. And then we also have the ability for customers to upload their own list. So what I'm going to be doing now is I'm going to actually be going through an end-to-end use case. I have a sample app running here. So I'm going to sign up, and I am going to create an account. I'm going to sign up. It's doing some proofing. I'm going to get a temporary password. So I'm going to use that. And I'm going to log in. It's going to take me to a change password, in which I'm going to type in a password. It meets all the criteria, 8 characters, alphanumeric, etc. But you can see now that the password intelligence capability has detected it's a common password, and it gives the user insight that they are doing that, but also the opportunity to change their password or continue. Again, balancing user experience and security, but also having visibility for the organization to understand what's going on. So for the purpose of this, I'm just going to click continue. And now it's going to do a risk authentication, and then I'm going to have to require it to do a fulfillment of this. But in the case of what's happening in Verify, now let's go into the reports, and you can actually see that this event was captured, it was audited, and you can oversee a period of time all the checks that are happening and what exactly is going on. So as I go back to my tenant, I have a one-time password. I'm going to fulfill that. And the risk score is also being accumulated over time. So you can see that in the report here associated with the capability. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen. If I can stop sharing my screen, hopefully, oh, there it is. Okay. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Preeti to talk about the threat detection capability.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Thanks, Milan. Thanks for covering this demo. So let me talk a little bit more on the threat detection part, which Milan talked about earlier. So let's deep dive into what really it is. So as Milan mentioned, the threat detection is about analyzing the incoming traffic, which could be the login request. And this traffic is analyzed across all our tenants. and to identify any indicators of attacks. And these indicators of attacks could be either for brute force attack or credential stuffing attack. And once we find out that there is an indicator of attack, we generate a threat event. And in addition to creating a threat event, we also generate the list of suspicious IPs so that we can apply the proactive remediation on the incoming traffic as well. So to understand this better, let's look at the next slide, which talks about what are the different indicators of attacks which we can detect in Verify. To start with, the first one is the known IOCs. So known IOCs are basically the IP addresses which has the history of activity like bots, malware, or scanning activity. And this is based on the threat intelligence research done by Expose, which analyzes the 1.5 petabytes of data to figure out what are the IP addresses which are doing malicious activity and gives us the risk score for each IP addresses. And based on this information, if we see a traffic coming from such known malicious IP addresses, then that could be an indicator of an attack. So we generate a threat event for that, and then admin can take proactive action to either block them or get alerted on the traffic. The next one is the brute force attack. So brute force attack is an attack where attacker uses the trial and error to try to find the username password combination, right? And typically this, as the attacker will not have the right set, it will result into multiple failed logins. So this is a common indicator of attack for the brute force. And what we do is we detect such behavioral anomalies where we compare what we see, what is the normal behavior with respect to what we see in last 1 hour. And such anomalies are again alerted as a threat event, indicating that it could be potentially a brute force attack. And in addition to alerting that, it will also have the additional context, like what are the IP address where we are seeing this suspicious activity, what are the users or accounts on which we have seen this activity, the applications, and so on. And this context can be used by the IAM admin or even SOC to determine if this is something which could be an attack or not. The next one is the credential stuffing attack. So credential stuffing attack is a subset of brute force attack where the attacker uses the compromised credentials list. So typically the failed logins which we see here are like username password related failures, and similar to brute force attack, we can use the behavior anomalies to detect this. However, another key indicator for credential stuffing attack is the usage of compromised credentials. So Milan just now talked about like we can detect like if the incoming credential is compromised or not. However, if we see like there is like 1 or 2 compromised credentials being used, then it may not be a concern because it may not be an attack. However, if we start seeing a number of such failures from the same IP address, so this is a typical indicator of an attack of credential stuffing. And so here, basically, the password intelligence helps us to detect this credential stuffing attack. And again, in the demo, I will show like what all things we provide as a context, so that that context can be used to analyze whether this is really an attack, and also to take the proactive actions. Like we also detect like what are the possible compromised users, and then these users could be then blocked. The next one is the password spray attack. This is a special attack where attacker uses the same password for multiple usernames. And this could be easily detected with the pattern recognition. That's another indicator of attack. And the next one is the real-time detection of suspicious traffic. So as we see a lot of traffic across all our tenants, what we have done is we have built a machine learning models based on the historical data, which also includes the attack data. And then this data, these models can then be used to predict whether the incoming traffic is suspicious or not. And if it is suspicious, then maybe the proactive remediation, like either to block it or send it for additional verification via MFA, can be done. And we are using classification and deep learning techniques for this. And as I mentioned, the proactive remediation is something which is applied for all these indicators of attacks, where we populate a list of global suspicious IP addresses, and these IP addresses can then be used to either block or alert. And note that here, like if one of our customers is having an attack, the same IP addresses will also be available for other customers, so that they, though they are not seeing that traffic, but the traffic from those malicious or suspicious IPs can also be blocked for that customer, because we know that these are the attackers' IP addresses. So let me move on to the next slide. So this slide captures like, so to show these threat events for this IAM admin, we have a report which I will cover in the demo. However, I want to talk about the impact which it has created for us, right? So we are running this for Verify since almost 1.5 years. And here I'm bringing up like some of the statistics on what kind of suspicious traffic we have seen and we were able to detect. So in last 1 year, we have almost detected 11,000 suspicious activities for 61 of our customers. And this includes the 150 major threats for our 11 customers. And this includes some of the brute force attack, credential stuffing attack, the deep crawl bot activity, which we were able to detect and proactively remediate. So, so the next one is the demo part. So let me quickly share my screen. Okay. I hope the screen is shared. So here, this is the Verify 10, which we have. And Scott is the IAM admin who wants to review what are the different threats which have been identified. So if I switch to the admin tab, it shows some of the statistics. In fact, as soon as the Scott enters, this is the chart which shows various failed logins in last 24 hours. As you can see here, there is a sudden increase in number of failures. So this is what we have done as a simulation of an attack, where we have created a suspicious activity. And let's go to the reports now, which can show like what are the threat events which have been generated based on this suspicious activity. So this is a report where here it is showing the statistics for last 30 days, like how many alerts have come, how many critical alerts versus warnings. And it also shows what is the trend. Like here we have this abnormal user activity, compromised credentials, credential stuffing attack, and multiple failed logins. So it also shows what is the trend for these alerts. However, maybe what would be more interesting is to look at what are these threat alerts and some of the details which we provide for additional context and the proactive remediation. So here, let's look at the first event, which is the compromised credentials. So during simulation, what we have done is we have created a suspicious traffic where the compromised credentials are being used. And as you can see from this suspicious IP, there are multiple users for which the compromised credential was used. And again, like as I mentioned earlier, if there are 1 or 2 compromised credentials being used, it may not be a concern. However, if we start seeing a number of these, then it could be an attack. Like in this case, you can see there are 65 compromised credentials being tried from this suspicious IP address. So all this information is available here for Scott to review. And for the additional details, he can also go into the event details. So I will cover that for another alert. The next one is the abnormal user activity. So this is an indicator of a brute force attack where the attacker is enrolling lot of devices, and these could then be misused by the attacker. So like in this case, we have detected an activity like from this IP address. For this specific user, there were 20 devices which got enrolled. And this is not something which is a normal behavior and could be a brute force attack. And hence it has got detected with the severity as critical. The next one is the multiple failed login. So multiple failed login is like if we see anomalous traffic from a specific IP address, and if we see the traffic from multiple IP addresses, then we will see multiple alerts for these. Like for example, here and here, there are two alerts being generated, and here the IP address is provided, and also it is showing how many anomalous events we have seen. And typically the normal volume of the events from this IP address is 0. However, we have suddenly started seeing 11,000 failures, and it also gives other context like what are the users involved here. And the last one which I want to cover is the credential stuffing attack. So credential stuffing attack is where we look at the anomalies of username password failures and the compromised credentials. And here, as you can see, the same IP address is there as we had simulated the attack from single IP address. However, in the real case, you will see multiple IP addresses being used by the attacker, and you will see top 5 of those in this. And as I said, like the detailed event is the one where the list of all the IP addresses along with all the context is provided. So here, like some of the things which I would like to highlight here is, so this is the compromised list of compromised users. So as we are seeing the traffic, which is suspicious traffic, where we are seeing a lot of username password failures. However, from the same IP address, we do see one user for which the login was successful. And this could be a compromised user or account. And if this event is found to be a legitimate attack, then maybe this user account can be blocked as it is found as a potentially compromised account. And in addition to that, there are a lot of other things which are provided as a context, like, for example, what is the GeoIP or the ASN information for the IP address which are involved. And this is very useful in some of the attacks which we have seen in the past, where the attack typically happens from specific ASN. And here it starts showing up all the ASNs which are involved. And typically the attacker ASN would be in the top because that's the one where we get a lot of traffic. And it, in addition to that, we also provide the context around like what kind of traffic it is, what kind of, like in this case, it is username password is the are being used here, and that's why it is failing. It is also showing what are the different causes which it is generated. So as you can see here, you can see that for different users, these are the invalid credential as a cause of failure being shown. So yeah, so that's pretty much from the demo side. So let me hand over back to Milan.
Thanks, Preeti. Okay, so what we described up to date was how IBM Security Verify is looking at this in the context of compromised credentials, as well as the capability that Preeti alluded to in terms of understanding the traffic that's coming in from a login standpoint. The next thing that we're going to be looking at in the context of this funnel now is how IBM Security Verify is out of the box enabling organizations to use phishing-resistant authentication using passkeys, previously known as FIDO2 as the standard, fast identity online, as well as the continuous risk assessment that we do in the context of user logins. So in that spirit, just as a quick data point and a quick experience here. So you can see on the left how all of IBM is enabled to use passkeys to log in the context of phishing resistant authentication, as well as we have other methods of passwordless authentication like a QR code using the IBM Security Verify Authenticator app. And this is really where, although we want to ensure that customers are not using common phish passwords, we ultimately want to take organizations and enable organizations to get to passwordless, because that's the ultimate goal. And doing so in a way where the experience is enhanced by having the seamless ability to use passkeys, but also the security posture is also made more robust. So what I'm going to be doing now is I'm going to be taking you through the passkeys demo with the same user that I was creating an account with in Rachel Green. So as you look at my screen, I'm back to the same web application. I'm logging in. Instead of using username and password, I can now use a passkey. And as part of me using a passkey, I'm just clicking the TPM or the sensor on my MacBook. It's doing a risk analysis. And in this context, it's checking to make sure that I'm also who I am. So it's going to ask me for another method. I'll still use the passkey. And now I've logged in. Now, what do we just see? I didn't type in a password. I used passkeys as a way to log in. There were some checks that happened, and another passkey invocation was done because there was some compromise or risk detected. But at the end of the day, it's ensuring that still we're able to provide the frictionless and secure experiences. So as we go back to my Verify tenant, you can now see the reports here. So there was a change in user attributes, which is why the user was at a risk level of high. Therefore, it required an additional check. And as you can see, this is the adaptive access capability, where you can see at a historical period, what is the risk posture of your users? How many have been classified as very high, high, medium, or low? Now, if we look at this risk level and we sort to very high, you can see, we detect things like a remote access tool. And these are the things that help us indicate what allows and what requires the access policy to be determined. The other thing I'll show you is you could also see the MFA activity. And you can see, hey, Rachel Green used the Rachel Green passkey device to log in. So at the end of the day, the full funnel is what we really look to address in the context of the vectors, which are how do we prevent organizations and how do we enable organizations to proactively stay ahead of identity threats? And these are the vectors and these are the mediums that we have in place to help protect these organizations, all delivered by the IBM Security Verify SaaS solution. So as we get back to the closing remarks here, we don't see any questions. So if you have any questions, either please ask them here or please reach out to us. Since there are not any questions, the last thing that I'll say is if you have not played with IBM Security Verify, you can go do so at ibm.com/verify, and you'll be able to spin up your free trial and be able to experience some of the things that we showed you here today in the context of proactively detecting and mitigating large-scale identity attacks. So with that, thank you for your time and appreciate you listening to us live. And if you are going to be listening to the recording, hope you enjoy the recording.